We're just going to pray that this is something. Ladies and gentle thems. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of variation when it comes to programming exercises and programming workouts week to week. If you haven't watched our video yet on why your training program probably looks the same week to week, go ahead and check that out. The link is in the bio. It's a good primer to this. We're going to get a little bit more specific today about exercises, about variation, about what it means to always have random exercises in the plan, or should it be structured long-term the same way? Let's get into it. Training is a form of stress on the body, and we stress the body very specifically to get adaptations that we want that then improve our fitness, improve our weight, improve our health, improve our sport performance, whatever our goal is. So those adaptations are specific that we're looking for. That means the exercise that we give to get that adaptation needs to be specific. So when we're just constantly doing variation, we don't really give our body the time to adapt to doing that exercise because we're always throwing it different exercises, asking it to do different things. Now, here's the fun part and where variation gets really exciting. There are absolutely times when variation is necessary. That is in the form of regressions and progressions. Regressions are taking a step back. For example, if someone gets injured, maybe you have a limited range of motion in your joints and need something else. Maybe you experience pain when you're doing something like deadlift. We can regress it in this category and then find a suitable substitute that does the same thing but doesn't cause you as much pain. It is the same thing when we have beginners. We're not going to give the beginners a hex bar deadlift, most likely on the very first day. We're going to look specifically at how they move. So we're going to regress the exercise that we might do with collegiate or high school athletes and ask them to do a step behind that so that they can work up to have the capacity to do this exercise. That's a regression. A progression is one step forward. It's making something more challenging. So instead of doing a split squat, now you do the hex bar deadlift. Instead of doing a goblet squat, we're going to work on squatting with the bar at all. Now, if you're already squatting with the bar, now we're going to add weight. That's the progression. We're adding something to it. And that's where variation becomes important. Because if we always train exactly the same thing, if I always give an athlete 3x8 goblet squat, they're going to get really great at doing 3x8 goblet squat, but that doesn't progress them. That doesn't move them forward. That doesn't raise the capacity of fitness, the speed, the strength, the flexibility, the endurance of the athlete. So I got to look at doing something else. I have to challenge them now by progressing them. So we can progress things either through repetitions, through tempo, by slowing the repetition down or speeding it up, adding a power or speed element to it, or simply by adding more weight. But we can also make the exercise more challenging and complicated. The question is if that's always necessary to make an exercise more complicated. And that's where we have to get into weighing the benefits and the risks of an exercise. Is it worth giving this athlete this exercise? Is the benefit potentially really going to be that huge that the risk is really worth it? So variation really is important. It's just more important not to vary things all the time. We have to always give the body time to adapt to what we give it in the first place. And that's why your exercises don't need to be different every single day of the week, of the month, of the year. They need to be somewhat the same, at least in the same category. Speaking of categories, let me tell you what those are. All of human movement breaks down into 4 specific motions: push, pull, carry, and rotate. Now, of course, it can be more complex than that. We have upper body, lower body, and whole body push, pull, carry, and rotate exercises. But for the most part, we break it down into upper, lower, whole body, vertical, and horizontal, sagittal, frontal, and transverse. All movement breaks down into those 4 categories. A deadlift, for example, is a lower body pull. A pull-up is an upper body pull. It's vertical, right? It's not moving this way. It's moving this way. So it would be a vertical upper body pull. A sprint, for example, in the first 10 to 15 meters, when we're accelerating, is a lower body push and an upper body rotation. Whereas when we're in max velocity, over about 20 meters, it's actually a lower body pull more than anything and still an upper body rotation. Now, we can be a little bit nitpicky with those things. That's not exactly technically correct, but you get the idea. So within that movement category, now it gets more simple. If you're having trouble with a deadlift, for example, we look for another lower body pull and upper body hold, right? Because we're not rotating there, but we're also not pushing or pulling. We're basically just holding. That has a similar effect. And we do then that exercise. But when the deadlift gets to Easy. Now we look for a more complicated lower body pulling motion, or we add weight to the deadlift, or add intensity, add speed, whatever. So just to wrap up, variation is great, but in context. We need first the structure so that our bodies can get used to, adapted to movement, and raise our whole capacity for training, for fitness, before we add in too much variation. And then we work within those categories in order to make sure the variation is as healthy and purposeful as possible.